Hello everyone. In this video, we'll be discussing certain important topics which have been added in chapter 2, which is the end of bipolarity of book 1 political science. So the text of chapter 2, the end of bipolarity, has been already covered and the videos are available on this channel. However, there are certain new topics which have been added in the new curriculum of 2020 and 2021. These topics are the unipolar world, Middle East crisis with emphasis on Afghanistan and the Gulf War, democratic politics and democratization, in which we have to talk about CIS and the 21st century Arab Spring. So we'll be starting with the first topic, which is the unipolar world. So for this, you need to have an understanding of chapter 1, which is the Cold War era, and chapter 2, the end of bipolarity, which I've already discussed. Now let's begin with the first topic, which is the unipolar world. So during the Cold War, the world was divided into two power blocks. So the power distribution was between two groups or two camps, one of which was headed by the USSR, which is Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, and second was headed by USA, which is United States of America. तो इस पावर डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन को कहा गया था द बाइपोलर वर्ल्ड बिकॉज बाई मीन्स टू, polar means opposite ends. So the power was divided into two different blocks, two opposing forces, which was headed by USSR and USA respectively, and the world which we were living in was known as the bipolar world. So अब the Cold War basically ended in the 1990s, as we've already discussed in chapter 2. This also meant that the bipolar world came to an end. इसका मतलब ये हुआ that one out of these two forces came to an end, and that force was USSR. So the USSR disintegrated in the year 1992. This disintegration of USSR is the subject matter of chapter 2. तो इस चैप्टर में हम बात करेंगे that what was the scenario after this disintegration of USSR. तो अब जब USSR की disintegration हुई, there were two different alternatives which were present, which was either there will be existence of a multipolar world, that is a scenario wherein different states will have power and the power will not be concentrated in a single entity, and the other option was the emergence of a unipolar world. तो unipolar का मतलब हुआ where there is only one superpower, right? So after 1992, we got to see that there was emergence of unipolar world with the dominance of USA. So the era of US hegemony began. Hegemony का मतलब होता है dominance. तो US hegemony का एक example है the use of the word America to refer to USA. So as we all know, America is a continent. We have the North American continent and we have the South American continent, and USA is just a part of the North American continent. However, जब भी हम America term का use करते हैं, we often use that to refer to USA. So this is one example of US hegemony. तो अब ऐसा कहना that US hegemony began only after the USSR disintegrated is not correct. This is because we see that some aspects of US hegemony go back to the end of Second World War. So USA started behaving like a hegemon or a dominant power even before 1992. So World War II ended in 1945, and this war ended when USA dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which are two Japanese cities. So we discussed about this in chapter 2. तो यहीं से हमें पता चलता है that USA was behaving like a sole superpower from the year 1945 only. Now let us discuss the meaning of the term hegemon and what are the three different aspects of hegemony. So the word hegemony means leadership or predominance of one state, that is, there is only one center of power. So the term was first used to denote the predominance or the preponderant position of Athens, which was a Greek city state. तो बहुत सारी Greek city states थी, out of which Athens was considered as the most powerful one. तो इस term की usage यहाँ से शुरू हुई. अब ये जो dominance होती है, इसके कई aspects हो सकते हैं. So there can be military domination, there can be economic domination, or cultural superiority, and so on. राइट तो हेजेमनी के तीन मेजर एस्पेक्ट्स हैं. First is hard power, second is structural power, and the third one is soft power. तो हार्ड पावर का मतलब होता है मिलिट्री डोमिनेंस. तो जो अमेरिकन हेजेमनी का बेड रॉक है, जो बेसिस है, दैट इज़ इट्स मिलिट्री डोमिनेशन, इट्स मिलिट्री पावर. तो जब हिरोशिमा एंड नागासाकी पर एटॉमिक बॉम्ब्स गिराए गए तो उसके ज़रिए यूएसए ने अपनी मिलिट्री सुपीरियॉरिटी को ही दिखाया था. देन यूएसए की मिलिट्री डोमिनेंस थी बोथ इन द एब्सोल्यूट टर्म्स एंड इन द रिलेटिव टर्म्स. तो एब्सोल्यूट टर्म्स में मिलिट्री सुपीरियॉरिटी का मतलब है दैट यूएसए हैड मिलिट्री कैपेबिलिटीज दैट कुड रीच एनी पॉइंट ऑन अर्थ एंड कुड कॉज ह्यूज डैमेज. So this indicated USA's massive military strength, which was also manifested by the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Then USA also had relative military superiority. Relative का मतलब होता है comparative. तो USA की military capability को जब हम बाकी countries से compare करें तो there is a huge gap. राइट, सो देयर इज़ नो वन दैट कैन मैच द पावर ऑफ यूएसए. इसके कुछ एग्जाम्पल्स भी हैं दैट यूएसए की जो स्पेंडिंग थी ऑन डिफेंस एंड मिलिट्री दैट वाज मोर देन द 12 नेक्स्ट पावर्स कंबाइंड. राइट, सो यूएसए इज़ ऑन नंबर 1, देन नंबर 2 से नंबर 13 तक जितनी भी कंट्रीज़ हैं, अगर हम उनकी मिलिट्री स्पेंडिंग को कंबाइन भी करें तब भी वो यूएसए से ज़्यादा नहीं है. Then a major portion of the budget of USA goes to military research and development. Then one of the most important factors which contributed towards the military dominance of USA was the qualitative gap. So if you remember, जब हमने chapter 2 में USSR की economy की बात करी थी, we saw that there was mass production which was going on. However, in terms of quality, it was lagging far behind the West. Right, so this is hegemony as hard power. Then we come on to hegemony as structural power. So structural power is when we talk about the economic aspect. Hegemony as a structural power implies the ability of the hegemon to establish certain norms of order and to sustain a global structure. तो इसके examples हैं that USA provided for global public goods. For example, the sea lanes of communication, internet, etc. So sea lanes of communication, that is the sea routes which are used by the merchant ships, they were provided by USA, right? So the US Navy played a huge role in this, right? So because of reasons like these, USA had considerable power over the laws of the seas, and it also had considerable say in the international trade. Then another example, which is internet, is the direct outcome of the US military research project which began in 1950. And आज की डेट में there is no place in the world which does not have or which does not use internet. Also, internet relies on the global network of satellites, and majority of these satellites, they are owned by none other than USA. Another example of this structural power is that USA had considerable say in the international organizations. For example, the World Trade Organization, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, etc. Then lastly, we have the example of MBA degree, which is Masters in Business Administration. So this MBA degree is also an outcome of the US hegemony, right? तो जो पहला business school था, that is the Wharton School, was established in the year 1881 in the University of Pennsylvania. And today there is hardly any university which does not offer an MBA degree course. So we've seen the two aspects, which is the military might and the economic might. Now coming on to the soft power hegemony, it means the cultural dimension or ideological domination. So in the case of military dominance, we have a forced consent. Why? Because आप अपनी military powers का use करके दूसरों को अपने under लेके आ रहे हो. However, in the case of soft power, you manufacture consent. That is, people themselves, out of their own free will or out of their own desire, want to align with you. They want to support you out of their own choice. So this soft power dominance is more effective than the military dominance. So this soft power relates to the ability of the hegemon to persuade others to view the world in a manner which is favorable to its own interests. So how is American culture exercising its influence over other cultures around the world? इसके examples हमें मिलते हैं in everyday life, be it in terms of food, in terms of clothing, in terms of the ideals of good life or ideals of society, and so on. So we see examples that people around the world, they try to adopt the American way of life, or they are influenced in some way or another by the American culture. American culture is often referred to as the most seductive and, in that sense, the most powerful culture of the world. So now we've covered the three aspects of American hegemony. Now let us discuss the Gulf War, which is also a classic example of USA behaving like a hegemon. So this is the Persian Gulf, this is Kuwait, this is Iraq, this is Saudi Arabia, Iran, right? So this war is known as the Persian Gulf War or the Gulf War because it took place in this particular region and involved all these countries. So the Gulf War is also known as the Persian Gulf War, the first Gulf War, or even the Kuwait War. We do not usually refer to it as the Iraq War because that is the term which is more associated with the 2003 Iraq War, also referred to in the US as the Operation Iraqi Freedom, right? तो इसे हम बोलते हैं Gulf War, and इसकी duration थी from 2nd August 1990 to 28th February 1991. This war was divided into two operations. First is Operation Desert Shield, which was from 2nd August 1990 to 17 January 1991. And the second part of it was Operation Desert Storm, which was from 17 January 1991 to 28th of February 1991. तो ऑपरेशन डेजर्ट शील्ड में हुआ द बिल्डिंग अप ऑफ ट्रूप्स एंड द डिफेंस ऑफ सऊदी अरेबिया. तो यूएसए एंड यूके ने अपनी फोर्सेस भेजी, अपने ट्रूप्स भेजे इन सऊदी अरेबिया सो एज टू प्रिपेयर अगेंस्ट इराक, right? And Operation Desert Storm was the actual combat phase जिसमें there was a war which was waged by the coalition forces of 35 nations. तो अब बेसिकली हुआ क्या? In August 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait and annexed it. तो अब इसको इन्वेड करने के कई सारे रीजंस थे, some of which include that Iraq was claiming some of the Kuwaiti territories and Iraq accused Kuwait of exceeding its OPEC quota for oil production. When Iraq invaded Kuwait, the president of Iraq was President Saddam Hussein. So after Iraq invaded Kuwait and annexed it, a lot of attempts were made to convince Iraq to quit this aggression and to withdraw from Kuwait. However, it was to no avail. Then the United Nations mandated the liberation of Kuwait by force. तो UN ने कह दिया that now force will be used to expel Iraq from Kuwait. So USA took the lead. The US president at that time, who was George H.W. Bush, he hailed the emergence of a new world order. So he said that a new world order would be established and a massive coalition force comprising of forces from 34 countries was established. And Second World War के बाद this was the biggest coalition force which was made. This entire combat was headed by an American general, Norman Schwarzkopf, and the 75% of the forces were from the United States. So you can see evidences of US hegemony. Also not to forget that United Nations, which mandated the liberation of Kuwait, is an organization जिसमें सबसे ज़्यादा funding जाती है by United States till this date. Right, so जो backing मिलती है United Nations को, that is from US. US also is a part of the Security Council. It is one of the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council जो ये सब mandates निकालते हैं. So although President Saddam Hussein said that this would be the mother of all battles, the Iraqi forces, they lost. They had to withdraw from Kuwait. So there were 34 countries against this one country, Iraq. So this was an obvious result. So this was what came to be known as the First Gulf War. So this First Gulf War showed the proof of the superiority of the US military capability. So it established US hegemony as a hard power. Now this Gulf War was also termed as a computer war because of the use of smart bombs and it was also known as the video game war. This was because of the television coverage which the war got, राइट. तो ये जो वॉर थी इसकी लाइव कवरेज दी गई उस टाइम पे, एंड पीपल कुड सी द वॉर, पीपल कुड सी द बॉम्बिंग्स बाय द अमेरिकन फोर्सेस ऑन दीज इराकी फोर्सेस एट देयर होम्स. तो लोग अपने घर बैठे देख रहे थे दैट हाउ द इराकी फोर्सेस दे वर डिस्ट्रॉयड कम्प्लीटली बाय द अमेरिकन कोएलिशन. So all in all, this established that USA was a hegemon in terms of military power. Also, it is stated that the US may have actually made a profit from the war because USA को बहुत सारी countries से funding मिली, for example from Saudi Arabia, from Japan, from Germany and so on. So this is all about the first Gulf War. So this is all for this video. In the next video, we'll be discussing the Middle East crisis and we'll be talking about Afghanistan. Thank you so much for watching.